Hi, I'm Roy Collin, and welcome to the show. I've got six podcasts, as you'll see behind me. The Speaking Podcast, where I'm talking to speakers, coaches, authors, and even marketers. I've got the Meditation Podcast, where I'm talking about meditation, breath work, yoga, chakras. I've got a load of meditations from 1 minute to 2 hours. I've got the Learn Polish podcast, and the episodes are about 5 to 10 minutes, and we deal with everyday topics like going to the dentist and things like that. The Awakening podcast is where I'm exposing fraud and corruption, but with solutions. And I've had guests like Mickie Willis, Dr. Peter McCullough, David Icke, and Thomas Rentz. The Crypto Podcast is where I'm exposing fraud and corruption in the crypto blockchain technology. So, about cryptos and NFTs, but also on the good things and how to invest safely. And finally, the Podfather, which you see there on my t-shirt, thepodfather.me, is where I'm helping podcasters either to start a podcast or existing podcasters how to grow their audience. And most of the episodes are short, but they're good tips that will help you improve your show. I also have a store on all of my podcasts, so you can go in. There's some of my products and also some of the affiliates that I do, and that helps me with the show. You'll find everything on bio.link/podcaster. And I'm also helping people start a podcast as well as doing a podcast tour. So you'll find everything on the link there. I'd like to thank my sponsor, DanielPacker.com. He's helping people with fear, doubt, and anxiety. He's got a 90% success rate, and you only pay if he helps you. So be sure to check him out, danielpackard.com. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Be sure to comment on the social media and let us know what you think. You don't always have to agree, but as long as it's not abusive, the comment will stay up. Welcome to the Speaking Podcast. You can find all our episodes on speakingpodcast.com. My guest has founded eReleases, that's eReleases.com. 25 years ago, they helped small businesses, authors, and startups increase their visibility and credibility through Tier 1 press release distribution. He lives in Baltimore area, USA. Please welcome Mickie Kennedy.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very good. I'm very good. So, I mean, you set it up 25 years ago, but I'd like to know a little bit about more like how you actually got into before you set up the company, your like history of this.
Sure. So I was a shy English major and I went to graduate school and got a master's of fine arts in creative writing with an emphasis in poetry. And my game plan was to write poetry and wait tables the rest of my life. And so I did that for the summer after I graduated. And I'll be honest, my back hurt, my ankles hurt. Uh, I felt so I don't know, psychologically scarred at the end of every shift that I wasn't reading or writing. And I just decided I needed to pivot to a safe office job. And so I applied to a few places and I got hired at a telecom research startup in Washington, D.C. And I was employee number three. And they just saw writing on my resume and said, "Hey, you're our press release guy now. Write press releases and send them out to the media." So I wrote some press releases. We faxed at the time because that's what you did 27 years ago. And I would send them out and nothing happened. And I just made it my mission to figure out what I was doing wrong. And I kind of realized that I was, taking little snippets of our data and saying, "Hey, here's the telecom traffic to and from the United States to all these Caribbean countries." And nobody really cared. But the thing I noticed was one of those countries had more telecom traffic than all the other countries combined. And I was like, well, I wonder why that is. So I looked into it, and it turned out at the time it was the center for 1-900 numbers, mostly to the US. You call, and for 50 cents a minute or something, you get your horoscope or other little things like that. You'd get, travel tips and pet psychics and all kinds of stuff. And so I thought that was interesting. So I wrote about it rather than just focusing on a block of numbers, the story behind it. And that really resonated. We got picked up in the Financial Times, The Economist, Wall Street Journal, and Washington Post, as well as some telecom trade publications. And so I just continued to try to find stories and, say, here's the data that supports this interesting story. And the media really responded. And so, um, uh, we were getting picked up all the time, and I felt like, wow, we're getting all these incredible sales. We started selling to investment firms and hedge fund people where we always previously just sold to telecom companies. and telecom analyst. And so, they were looking at this data as like indicators of economic growth in countries and stuff like that. So it was great. And at the same time, as I would do a faxing of 150 journalists, which took hours to program into a fax machine, which only held 100 numbers. So I had to delete them and then program it with the next 50. And I tried to get my boss to buy a second fax machine so I could have one with 100 programmed and 50 in the other, but they were so expensive. He said no. And so I was doing a lot of work of just programming numbers. A journalist, started requesting I email it to him. And that's when the light bulb went off and said, "Oh, email is so much better than faxing." And I mentioned it to my boss, and he said, "Oh, there could be a business there." And I thought of starting e-releases, so I took the next year in my spare time, which isn't considerable when you work at a startup, just contacting journalists and asking them if I could put them in my database and send them in press releases when I launched. And they all said yes, because at that time, email was fairly new, and they were just like, "Whoa, I could have targeted releases sent to me." And it was really great. I launched in October of '98. And I would just play the matchmaker, sending releases to journalists that wanted them. And my clients did pretty well. And PR Newswire eventually reached out to us and said, "Hey, we like what you're doing. We like that you're serving small businesses and entrepreneurs. Maybe there's a way we could work together." And they had suggested that I buy a local distribution through them, like a city or state, and get a reduced price on that. And I really, resisted that and said that my clients deserved a national distribution. Well, they charged $1,600 to move a national press release. And so I was charging just a couple $100 at the time. And so I didn't think anything would come of it. But one of the things I noticed when we were talking is they have a overnight editorial team that has to be there in case there's breaking news or a recall, or they wanted to get something out to the Asian markets. So they had to correspond with their Asian bureaus, and they didn't do much. And so I was like, "Hey, I could schedule all my press releases for the next business day. Your staff could set them up overnight. It wouldn't cost you additional labor." And so based on that, they were able to give me really good pricing for national distribution, mostly because we do a lot of releases. And so every release that goes out today gets a national distribution without having to pay $1,600. It's probably about a third, maybe 40% of that. And so it is a huge cost savings than going directly to the wire. And it's worked out extremely well. I move about 10,000 to 12,000 releases a year. And one of the things that I get to see is what releases work and what releases don't. And so I do try to then take my knowledge from that and pass it along to my customers and clients. And they largely ignore me, but it is something that I do try to pitch out and tell people about because it's such an educational thing that there are certain types of releases that are much more likely to get media pickup than others.
And I mean, you mentioned you were kind of early to the game with the email, because I even remember having the modem for the email at that stage. Like, but the way things have got now, I mean, I think I have something like 15,000 emails. It gets to a case where you're bombarded. How has it changed over the years? Where I presume like the journalists that or the papers that are putting out stuff are probably bombarded as well. So how do you navigate that?
So the good thing is, I think the newswire came along at a good time because email is no longer the best way to communicate with journalists. There are databases of journalists that are available for purchase, and when you have a golf club company that spent $25,000 or $15,000 for one of these databases annually, they feel like, well, we could email the 2,200 people that are interested in golf news, or we could talk ourselves into sending to a lot more. Like, hey, how about these financial analysts and banking journalists? You know, their clients buy golf clubs, but they don't write news about golf clubs, but they just spam them because they feel like we paid so much, we might as well just email everybody. It doesn't cost anything extra. And so, yeah, journalists are getting so much email, they're getting so much off-targeted email, and so their email is it's a mess. And, despite that, I know some PR firms who have relationships with journalists probably get whitelisted or filtered in a way that some of their stuff goes through. But I also know that a lot of them have to resort to picking up the phone and pitching over the phone just to get the journalist to go in their spam and folder and find them. And so it is an unfortunate development and change that's happened over the last 25 years, certainly.
And I'm not sure. I think it's called Goldcast. They were doing videos on people that, like, they do like a video that is kind of making them look like they came from here to there. And it looks like it's something that was just created on the person, and that's how they do it. But you had to pay 30 grand to do it. Most people wouldn't know that. But what I found out as well is the likes of Forbes, when they have person of the year or this or that, it ain't because you're the person of the year, it's people are paying to do that. And I'm just wondering, does that go on in every single publication that
Well,
you don't know what's real kind of news and what's paid?
right. So I will be honest. I think Forbes is one of the ones that I think skirts ethical lines. They have these columnists and people who write, and they often advertise that they can talk about a company and get you in an article on Forbes for a fee. And that's unethical. I mean, it's not supposed to happen. Now, these aren't the quasi journalists who write that are in the print publication. These are mostly like the blogger type, and they have a certain segment on the website where they do columns and things like that. But I don't like it. I'm not involved in that. I don't do paid placement. It's not earned media. And that's what we call it when a journalist writes about you organically. And people can tell the difference. I mean, there are a lot of business marketers when someone says, "Oh, I got in Forbes," their eyes roll because they know it's a paid placement. It doesn't mean anything. If you want it to mean something, show me the article in the print publication. It won't be there. They don't put those columns in the print publication. And but that being said, you were talking about other things like Man of the Year and stuff like that. I don't know. I mean, it does seem like that is a publication that has a way in which paid placement has a place, and I think it does tarnish the brand a bit. That being said, there's always probably stuff that goes on behind closed doors at a lot of places. If you're a struggling print publication in this era, I could certainly understand skirting the rules a little bit and maybe helping out someone in the hopes that they renew an advertising campaign or something like that. But I think that a lot of journalists still have strong ethics and are looking for something at the end of the day that will either educate or entertain their audience. And, that's their job. Journalists can say that their job is to uphold standards and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, if they do not educate or entertain their audience, they're going to be out of business as a journalist. They need to find the articles that will move the needle and keep their audience engaged and following them and that publication along. And for that reason, I always tell people who feel like they're too small to matter with the media, if you've got something that's unique and you have a either a unique selling proposition or you're doing something very novel in your industry, you stand a strong chance of getting picked up by the media, regardless of your size. These journalists don't get approvals from their audience every time they cover a new Microsoft Office suite. That's just something that they occasionally have to do. But if they pull out a tool that's relevant to the industry of their audience and it's from a small company that no one knows, they're going to get a lot more people saying that was a great discovery because no one knew about it. If they only covered big companies, the truth is their audience wouldn't be very educated and entertained because most people in that industry probably know the big guys. And so it is a matter of putting the spotlight on small and new companies and new businesses and people with new developments. And so for that reason, being small is not a disadvantage. It's probably an advantage to getting the media's attention.
And with like the press release, I mean, you've got electronic publications and you've got print publications, and sometimes they go on both. Does it really matter once you've got the numbers and it's kind of the relevant targeted audience?
So I don't think it matters. I think that for everybody, you should take the best news you got, the most newsworthy elements you have, and get it out there. And the great thing about The Wire is it reaches everybody. It reaches TV, radio, it reaches traditional print, trade publications, magazines, but even more importantly, it reaches bloggers. And that was a struggle. Over 15 years ago, the Newswire didn't want to give bloggers Newswire access. They wanted to restrict it. They could still look at the news publicly, but they couldn't log in to the Wire and create a customized feed, which is really valuable. If you're a journalist who's getting spammed and your email is crazy, you could log into the Wire and say, I'm interested in consumer electronics, and then customize your feed by saying exclude stereos or TV or things that you weren't interested in. And so that the feed that you see is very tailored and specific to you. And so they were restricting bloggers access to that at the time. And I remember I gave a pitch to the people at Pure Newswire saying, look, you're making a huge mistake here. And I pointed out 3 bloggers who had more traffic than their leading trade publications in web traffic. And a few months later, they reversed themselves. I'd like to think I was a voice in their ear that made them do that. And the funny thing is, now I've discovered that the Newswire gives access to a lot of Instagram influencers, for example, especially in the fashion space, because a lot of people in fashion have really large audiences on Instagram. So there are Instagram influencers that the Newswire's reached out to and given them journalist access. There's a guy I follow on TikTok called Snackalator. And in the US, he does a weekly roundup of new snacks hitting grocery store shelves. And he will just say, hey, from this picture, I can't tell if that's a glaze. This is a picture I got from the press release on the Wire, but I can't wait to try it and see if that truly is a glaze or if that's just a shine on the product and stuff. So he's very candidly saying that he relies on the Wire to get these advance notices of new snacks, and then just does a roundup every week on TikTok. And so where we're getting news is changing, and I'm very be proud that the Newswire is very accepting of a lot of these new media sources, and recognizing that media is changing, and it's great that the Newswire is still very relevant. In the U.S., there's 2 Newswires of press releases. There's PR Newswire, who I work with, and then there's Business Wire. There's a third wire called Globe Newswire that's trying to get market share, but it just has had a difficult time because busy journalists don't want to have to fish in like 3 ponds. It's so easy for them to fish in 2 ponds and feel like they're getting everything. And as a result, Globe has sort of pivoted where they just focus mainly on compliance for publicly traded companies who don't really care about getting media attention. In some cases, there's some publicly traded companies that don't even want the journalists looking too closely at what they're doing. So that's mostly what they've been focusing on. Despite that, there's a lot of companies out there with Wire in their name, but they're not Wires. There are Wires that I'm sure you've heard of, like Associated Press, Reuters, United Press International, UPI, and a few others. Their model is different. They don't move press releases. They move articles that they've written, and they license those articles to the media. So like the Baltimore Sun, which is sort of in my backyard, if there was a Supreme Court judgment at the end of yesterday, rather than have one of their journalists write that article, they could just pull that article that the Associated Press, knowing it's a really good article, and they just pay a licensing fee, and that their journalist who's juggling too many things doesn't have to write that article. And that's their business model. They do take press releases, but they always turn them into an article if they decide to cover them. And so that's the real difference. And so it's a lot of education in the marketplace and a lot of confusion in the marketplace. But being able to get in the Wire is a huge opportunity for people because if you have something that's very newsworthy and relevant, you can go really far. I have a case study on my website at ereleases.com. It's the top one, called the Dining Bond Initiative. It was set up very shortly during the pandemic to help out restaurants that were closed. And so we offered the press release for free because it was just a volunteer kind of effort. And the way it worked is you could nominate your favorite local restaurant, and if the volunteers were able to get in touch with them, you could give money that went directly to them. And it was sort of backed with what they called a dining bond, sort of playing off the war bond initiative of prior years. And it's sort of like a gift certificate, but it resulted in well over 100 articles. A lot of large publications picked it up, like the Washington Post and Wall Street Journal, but a lot of small daily papers. As a matter of fact, we quit counting the smaller papers because they just kept coming and coming. Over $10 million in revenue to help restaurants and over 100 articles by just hitting send and it just going on the wire and being really engaging and people really relating to it. I think it did so well because it was positive news at a time of uncertainty. We were sent home for 2 weeks to flatten the curve, and we saw what that turned into. And we also felt like we didn't have any power, but here was something we could do. Like give $20 to our, favorite restaurant we used to always go to on our anniversary or something like that. And it just felt nice and, made us feel good. And so, it really resonated. And that's the real value of working on a newswire is if you have something that is newsworthy and really relevant, it can really go far and wide.
And you mentioned the bloggers and the influencers. Is it a case with them that they're getting the information, they're not really earning from it, but they're bringing out big, valuable information, which in turn increases their audience, and then they get the paid stuff from other people? Is that how it's kind of working?
Yes, I haven't seen it with Snackulator yet, but he'd be stupid if he didn't, have someone reach out to him and say, "Hey, we have a new cereal hitting the shelves. We'd really like you to do like basically a 30-minute little commercial talking about it and stuff like that." I do see other influencers that do that, so it's a natural thing for them to do that. But at the end of the day, it's also free content for them. This guy. In the case of Snackulator has created a huge audience of people who just like to see what new snacks are coming out and they just find it entertaining and it's always sort of quirky and interesting because there's always wacky seasonal things like a weird St. Patrick's Day green product that's coming out or something along those lines. He also does a weekly fast food thing as well, and he also gets a lot of that from press releases as well. But it's just entertaining, and there are people that just like to follow the snack industry or the fast food industry, and so he's really got an engaged audience, and he is the one that's giving them everything before it's really publicly available. I mean, as soon as the company sends that press release before it's launched, he's got it and he's already communicating for people and they start to look for it over the next few weeks.
And I mean, I just know from even say like the podcasting, there's people kind of do tours on that as well, and people show numbers, and just because my experience, I've seen people showing millions, and they'd be like 5 or 10, and it's based on a previous product that they were doing. When you've got publications giving numbers, like you hear sometimes they're independently audited and stuff like that, but then again you're kind of, it's like the ISO. I remember the ISO, and it was like you're paying them to give you the ISO, so they make sure that you get it. Like, and there's always backhanders in everything.
Yeah, and there's publications that still have circulation numbers, but they don't have necessarily the readers. I still subscribe to what is it? I can't I just had it. Inc. magazine, for example, and Fast Company
I used
because
to get them.
because
Yeah.
because they send me something and say, renew for a year for $10 and give a free year to someone else. And so I just go, okay. So I give my sales guy a year for free and I pay $10 and we just play that game every year. It's so cheap. And yet I have to be honest, I've got a stack of them over here. I keep looking. I haven't probably read an article there in a year and a half. And I think a lot of people are probably in the same boat. And it's just one of the unfortunate things about print. Do know that a lot of people are navigating to web only. And a lot of people that do have print also have web, either behind a paywall or it's ad supported. But the one thing I do know is that when you're doing a press release, you are given the opportunity to include two images. And because people are moving online, it's a huge advantage if you have really good couple of photos. If I'm a journalist looking at two stories and I feel like they'll probably result in a mid-grade article, and I'm trying to figure out which one to go with, I'm going to gravitate toward the ones with good images because I know that my audience online is really going to engage with that, and they're really going to see that article and look at that photo, and they're going to have a more fulfilling experience. And also, a trend I've seen over the 25 years is it used to be these photos had to be very professional, had to, be done by, I don't know, a photographer with high quality photos. If it was a product, it was usually on, I don't know, blue silk or velvet, well lit. And those do not engage people. The ones that people engage with now are more candid shots. So someone in their office actually using your product and it just looks like someone's aunt, that's going to do way better than the female car models that are all of a certain look and something like that. So the things that look more natural and more candid are going to do very well. And I think that what's happened over the last 25 years with PR is really great because, you don't have to pay someone for a fancy photo. You can just use really nice candids. And then secondly, you don't have to have the most perfectly written press release. I told someone that when I started, if you had a grammatical error or an error that was like punctuation, well, probably not punctuation as much, but like a misspelling, and it got through the wire because we check our releases, but the wire does as well. But if something slips through 20 some years ago, that was the kiss of death for that release. That release is going nowhere. And now the wire doesn't care and journalists don't really care. It used to be that the headline always had to be perfect AP title case, which meant that if it's like, the or of, it's not title case. It's just, it's a very idiosyncratic thing. And now if you send something over that's just all initial capped or in some cases all capitalized, the wire will sometimes just send it out and no one is going to lose their job over it and you're not going to not get picked up because of it. And I think that that's just a really nice thing that the whole industry has relaxed and said, you know what? We don't really care about things that are perfect. People are, all day long writing back and forth through text, misspelling and, using abbreviations and stuff like that. So we're not fixated on how perfect something is. We're fixated now on what's the message. And I think that's really good that you're being judged for, the newsworthiness of the message and not the perfection behind it. And so I think these are all really good things that sort of democratize, I think, PR quite a bit. Where if you're a small business, one little mistake's not going to trip you up as long as you have a meaningful message that you're trying to share.
Yeah, excellent. And I'm just curious because you mentioned the pictures, and for example, I had a guy, and he teaches Krav Maga, and he's been around Europe doing it, so he's famous in Poland, very famous in Poland, and he was on my podcast, and I set up a tripod to take a picture, and I said, "Choke me," and he's like, "What?" I said, "Nobody's going to look at us if we're just standing next to each other." So he put me in a chokehold, and it just took off, like got a load of downloads and everything. And I'm just wondering, not when it's a product, but when it's a person. Does something like that kind of crazy, something that's like not just
Yes.
normal standing there work good in PR?
Yes, anything that engages people, that shows action or drama or gets people to go, whoa, what's going on here? And they want to read more to find out the context. That works really well. You don't want to go all the way to a complete PR stunt, but it's kind of hard to do with pictures. So I think that all of that works really well. It probably did very well with you because of just that. People are like, what the heck's going on here? And we have to do a second take, and then we like to read or learn more, maybe listen to the podcast or whatever to get some more context. And so Yeah, that's the way we work. That's the way we are with humanity. We're curious creatures, and if someone piques our curiosity, we want to read more. The backlash of that is the headlines that a lot of people do that are just fake outs. The ones that will tell you something that just isn't really true. It's like I saw one recently about is it J.K. Rowling may lose Harry Potter empire. And it was an article that just said that I think Universal is tired of all of her oversight and are looking to consider giving her an offer just to buy everything from her for like 40 some billion dollars. It's like that doesn't seem like someone who's going to lose their empire. It seems like someone who's going to be the probably one of the richest people in the world. And yet that headline kind of got people in a way that I didn't think was very genuine. Probably worked though, probably got a lot of readers, but for me, it kind of rubbed me a little wrong. And I do see a lot of
Kind of
people,
clickbait stuff, really,
yeah,
isn't
clickbait headlines. I'm not a fan of. But that being said, there's something to learn from them. Is there a way that you can uh, tell your headline in a way that's really captivating and it doesn't feel like a gotcha once someone starts reading the article? That's actually harder to do than the clickbaity headlines, and I think that's why so many people just revert to the easy clickbait headlines. But I think that already people are beginning to just tune them out. Just like they do with ads. And so I think that you really have to balance that a little bit better and try to dig in there and find a way that's more genuine and tells more alignment with what's going on in the story.
it? Okay. See, take me through the process. So just say, somebody's got, say, a coaching service. Is it that they create what they believe would be the best kind of article, and then ye put your spin on it and improve it, or do you actually just create the whole lot based on knowing what the person is doing?
Right. So most people come to us with a press release they've already written. Some will ask for a little bit of feedback, but our experience is a lot of them will just upload the release and hit send. And you know, as a result, after the sale, we have to try to educate them that, hey, you've done this first release. It's part of a PR campaign. Most PR campaigns are 6 to 8 releases. You did this. Maybe you should consider these other types of releases that are more strategic. And that's where I try to educate them going forward. It's a little bit harder to educate them when they've already got a finished release that they're proud of, and they really just want to get it out as soon as possible. And it's also difficult to get them to really redraft the entire release because they're so generally wedded to it and they feel like, let's see what this one does first. And so as a result, a lot of the releases that we get initially don't do very well, and we then go about trying to show them the opportunities that exist that are a little bit more newsworthy. The most popular press release that we probably get, it's probably tied with product launches, is a new hire. And generally, if that new hire is not a new company executive or an industry veteran, it's probably not going to result in very much. And so I tell people, hey, rather than spend a few $100s to send that over the wire, maybe just send it to your local paper. They have a on the move section usually. Same thing with your key trade publication. They generally have an on the move section. Send a picture, a few sentences about the new hire. You really don't even have to write a press release. That's probably the most you were going to get anyways from the press release, and it really isn't very difficult to establish a couple of relationships, especially on the move sections usually have an email address dedicated to that you could just send. And usually they just, if they have room in the space for it, they'll usually just run it just as a matter of fact. And so I think that that's where I focus that. But the other types of releases then that people should be considering are yeah, focusing on what your unique selling proposition is. What is it that you do that's different than everybody else? I think this is an area that I see a lot of startups do very well. Here in the US, we have a show called Shark Tank. I think it's like Dragon's Den
Oh,
in the
I'm
UK.
familiar with Mark Cuban and
Yeah.
yeah, a few other. No, it's a
And
good show. Yeah.
the producers tell the people that before their episode airs, they should do a release, and they often recommend us. So we do a lot of the releases for people before their episode airs. But Startups, even if they're not going on Shark Tank, generally do very well because they know what they're doing very well and what how they distinguish themselves from every other company in the marketplace. And so they have a really good elevator pitch, and they can really just hone in on what makes them different, what their secret sauce is, and focusing on that in a release, especially if it's like launch release, or you've reached a new milestone, your version 2.0 or something like that with your solution, can do very well. Other things that work really well are sharing your story. Sometimes your entrepreneur journey is newsworthy, sometimes on its own, but sometimes you can make it a secondary thing in a press release. Like maybe you're doing a new product release, and later in the release, usually in the boilerplate, we call the about section, where it's about company. You can sort of put a few sentences in there about what makes you unique, or what your story is. And when talk about story, it's like everybody that goes on Shark Tank, one of the first things they do is they open up about how the business was created. And usually it's a uh, something that's an obstacle that they overcame, or vulnerability, like maybe they had a health issue and they had to, resign from their job or take time off, and they had this hobby that they did, and they wondered if they could start a business with that. Or maybe they went through a painful divorce, and they were looking for something they could start from home, and they discovered this little thing, and it just grew from there. And one of the reasons that everybody that goes on Shark Tank leads with that is it's a human interest element. It immediately humanizes you to the audience, and creates this immediate empathy. And that's very powerful, because all of a sudden we care about this person, and we feel for them, and we want to follow them through their journey and find out whether they got the funding or didn't. And the same thing happens in a press release. And so sharing your journey really takes the audience along and makes them sort of care about the company, because people at the end of the day like to do business with people, not logos and corporations. And I think it's a very human element, and it's one of the ways in which you can sort of break through and really get people to care about your products and your services, because they care about you and your story. Other things that are kind of newsworthy are data points. Sometimes taking publicly available data and putting it in your release can really bolster your announcement. For example, let's say you have a new logistics software solution for the trucking industry, and you put a data point in there like, hey, 67% of new transport companies fell in their first 5 years, often because they can't get their profits under control, because they don't have a logistics software solution that's monitoring everything. That's where we come in. So you really put the stakes of why your product solution is so important for the industry. And a journalist knows that, hey, that data point is going to make my audience care a lot more about this logistics solution for my audience of people in the transport industry. And so that can really work. Data could also work if you create it. And this is one of the things I suggest to anybody who just feels like they've tried a few releases and it didn't work, and they're about to throw in the towel. I tell them to do this because it's never failed anybody that I've coached through it. And that is to do a survey in your industry. Put together a few meaningful questions that are relevant today. They can be things that are trending in your industry. They could be things that you've noticed if you were at a conference or a trade show. What are the things you would ask colleagues that work in your industry? Like, hey, have you noticed this or that? Often it's things that nobody's covered in the media. So those are really ripe, because maybe the media should be talking about them. It could be like, have you noticed that everybody's like really slow paying lately, and net 30 has turned into like net 90 with apologies, and things are not looking great. We're considering laying off. How about you? And they're like, oh no, we're growing at 20%. No, but if it's, people say, oh yeah, we're tightening up and considering layoffs as well. Those can all be really good indicators of what's going on in your industry. So I like to create 16 questions, 4 questions per page in SurveyMonkey. On the last page, you can put like a wild question. I call them left field questions, like something that you would just like to, maybe it's a funny question, but it could give you some interesting results. And a lot of times that's been the question that we decide to go with in the press release. You then take that link and you approach an independent or small trade association in your industry. The large trade associations are no good. They get media attention all the time and they have their own PR people and they wouldn't cooperate with you. But the small and independent trade associations don't get a lot of media attention. So if you approach them, I usually like ones that have like, 500 members and up, and just say, hey, could you send this link out to your members in exchange? I will mention your association in my press release I'll be issuing over the wire. Two-thirds of the time, they'll say yes. Occasionally, they might push back and say, hey, how about we co-brand the survey or give us a little bit more exposure? I don't necessarily see a downside to that. I just don't want them to get involved with changing the questions and approving stuff and approving the press release and everything like that. It's just, and the smaller and independent ones, they're pretty flexible and they generally don't get involved. They just see it as a win, just being attached to the release. So, uh, 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 that's what I recommend. There are so many trade associations in all your industry. Just look for one that sort of aligns with you. In the PR space, I was told by a PR professional in a podcast that, well, Mickie, what would you do with our industry? There's only one trade association, Public Relations Society of America. And so I just went back and said, last time I checked, there was over 470 PR trade associations in the United States. Some of them are very esoteric, like, people from a particular state or maybe Italian Americans in the Mid-Atlantic PR professionals. But there's a lot of them that do represent the bulk of PR firms. There was one I think that was PR firms of 50 employees or less, and I was like, that's probably most people. I'm sure there's some big PR firms, but there's probably just a dozen or 2 dozen at the most that are probably way beyond that, or hybrid organizations that are more like ad agencies. So pick one that aligns with your audience of who you feel like you are, and just approach them. And like I said, two-thirds of the time they'll say yes. If not, you move on to the next one. If you don't get 100 results, I do tell them that we're looking for at least 100 results. Um, you can ask them, hey, could you push this on social media or consider a second email send? We're really trying to get over 100 so that I can use your audience. Otherwise, I won't be able to. And usually they'll do that. They want it to win for them. And so you then look at all of the results from the questionnaire, build a page on your website with all of the questions and answers, and then focus the press release on maybe one or at most two of those questions. You're going to look for the one that has the biggest surprise or aha moment for people, the one that people would really want to know the answer to right now, and focus on that. Put some analysis in there of why you felt that the numbers skewed a particular way, usually within a quote by you, and make that quote sort of be really strong. And by that, it could be the way that you speak. It's very colorful or creative, or it could just be that you've paraphrased it so powerfully and said it so succinctly that it stands as like, whoa, this is a really strong quote. And then you're going to, send that out to the media, include the link to all the questions and answers. And generally, when someone I coach through that, the least they usually get is 4 earned media articles, but most often it's usually 8 or more articles as a result of that, just sending out that one release. And those are the types of things that you can do that are very strategic that anyone can do. I had a local auto repair shop in Pennsylvania that their only goal was to get automotive industry links to them. And they had a new website. Their old one, they lost the domain. And so they were really looking for authoritative links in their industry. And so we did that. The left field question we asked was what was the strangest thing a customer left in their car while being repaired? and it wasn't statistically relevant because no one wrote the same thing. But we put a roundup on the website of all the responses, and in the press release, we just focused on the 20 of them, and we mentioned that all the other questions and answers and all the other responses were on the link. So of the 14 automotive trade publications that ran with the article, I think around 8 of them included the link back to the website, which really, improved their SEO. Within 3 months, they were ranking #1 in their area for city auto repair. And so, that worked really well. It allowed them to stand out, and they felt like, who are we to do a survey? We have no authority. We're just a local auto repair shop. But, you get that authority just by doing it. And it's one of those ways to really just stand out as an expert in your industry.
Oh, excellent. And when you submit something to the wire then, well, like a press release, is it that it lasts for so long and disappears, or is it there? How long does it actually stay that people can pick up on it?
So with the wire, it stays permanently on the back end. So if you're a journalist and you have a login, you can go in and do research and searches, and you can pull up releases going back, a decade or more. And so it does live long there. In the feed that comes up, it sort of just does go by pretty fast. So uh, it generally, with most people, if it's not a monthly magazine, you generally will notice most of the articles that are immediately going to happen are within a week or two, maybe 3 or 4 weeks at the most. If you do get picked up in a monthly magazine, it can be 3 or 4 months before that article comes out. So that's just one thing to be mindful of. I get a lot of releases from people who are wanting to get into women's magazines in particular, selling cosmetics and products for the end of the year holidays, and they send them in November. And I'm like, do you not see the January issue already on the stands right now? December's come and gone in the newsstand world, so it's too late to get holiday coverage if your goal is monthly magazines. So you have to be mindful of people's timelines. Newspapers and a lot of your weeklies are, probably less than a month. And the monthlies are the ones that, if you are solely targeting the monthlies, you probably do need to give them 3, 4 months out.
And I know you kind of mentioned to kind of do maybe 6 to 8. Is that you're doing that in a month period, or
Oh
what's the kind of
no,
time
no.
frame that you would do the 6 to 8?
Right. So usually with a PR campaign, you map out a campaign of 6 to 8 releases. It may take you 6 to 8 months if you do them monthly. It may take you 3.5 months if you do them every other week. It could also be that, if you're a really small business and you're doing a lot of things, you might be able to only fit a release every 2 to 3 months. So maybe quarterly might be a goal. But the thing is, you should kind of have mapped out the types of releases that you want to do and take into account milestones that you have going forward. So if you know that in a year you're having a new launch of a product, then you kind of want to make that one of your 6 to 8 releases that you're going to sort of incorporate into a PR campaign. But generally, 6 to 8 is a good measurement to sort of look back at and say, which of these releases resonated and resulted in earned media, and learn from that. In some cases, you can say, is there a way to take that message that really resonated and worked and maybe tweak it or update it or put a different spin on it? We did releases for a carpet company in New Jersey. Uh, can't think of a more non-newsworthy business. And they came to me and said, we have a yearly budget to do a press release a month. And I just said, I think this is a waste of your money. And I said, you're a local carpet company. So we took their money for 4 months and nothing happened. So we were doing a brainstorm session and trying to figure out, how am I going to crack this nut? And I asked them, were they open to any type of media, including trade publications? And they said yes. As a matter of fact, they really wanted trade publications. And I'm like, you do realize none of your customers read trade publications? They said, that's not a problem. We just wanted to get that credibility from being in trade publications. So I had discovered that their biggest enemy wasn't like Rex's Rug Emporium across the street. It was the big box home improvement stores. Here in the US, it's predominantly Home Depot and Lowe's. And they told me why that industry is so bad for the carpet industry. And so we built a press release, sort of a David versus Goliath, and talked about how bad these big box home improvement stores were for the industry and how difficult it is as a local carpet business to compete against a billion-dollar giant. And so we sent that release out, and it got picked up in over 10 floor trade publications. And we continued to use that same angle. It was not the same release, but it was tweaked differently. It was like, uh, you know, uh, how as a local carpet company to do you distinguish the fact that the big box home improvement stores will call anyone on that's licensed in the state and ask if they're interested in installing carpet. And so that was another release, and they really do that. They look at the people who are licensed in the state, have a home improvement license, and call them and say, "Hey, we have a job tomorrow to put 2,400 square feet of carpet in a home. Are you available?" And if I'm a roofer who's never installed carpet and they just called me and I don't have any work, I'm going to go to YouTube tonight and try to figure out how to install carpet. And as a result, people are going to get carpet that's going to need to be restretched in a couple of years. Maybe the seams are a bit more noticeable than they should be. And it's just not a great experience for most people. And so we just continued to sort of milk the horror stories and the problems of these big box home improvement stores. And at the end of the year of working with them, they had over, I think, 30 clips mostly were from floor trade publications, but it also included New Jersey Magazine, which was a really great magazine for them, and their local paper. And they put them all in what they called a brag book. And every time they went to someone's home and gave them a quote on a carpet install, they would say, "Hey, we're not going to come in as the cheapest, but here we are in Floor Trade Weekly. Here we are in this publication. Here we are in New Jersey Magazine, the local newspaper. I guarantee you that anybody else that comes and gives you a quote isn't going to have the experience that we have and the industry recognition that we have." And so all of a sudden that homeowner is like, they're $400 more, but I feel very comfortable with them. Because, there's this, when you get earned media, it's almost like social proof. It's a signal of trust. It really is a huge credibility, even though the people didn't read the articles. They just saw the headlines and the mention of them in it. And that was all they needed to get that sea of trust radius that happens from earned media. They started converting about 17% more of these at-home consultations where they give them a quote. And that just moved the needle so strongly in their business. Almost one out of every 5 sales that they were previously losing, they were now winning. And so it really was a huge boon to their business and really shows the power of media, that people recognize that when a lot of people write about you, it is a signal that you are credible. You have that third party corroboration that is a signal of trust. And I think online testimonials, have fatigued in a way that ads have. But I think that earned media, when a journalist that it's an outlet you respect, it really does send a signal that this is a company I should consider working with.
And I mean, kind of following up for that, because you see people, if they were on Wall Street Journal and all these different things, they have it on their website, which, yeah, looks good. You're going, okay, he must be good if he's on that. That's kind of two-part question. One, should you have the link that when you click on, say, the Wall Street Journal, that it brings you to where the article was? And two, do you encourage people then, when they get published in Forbes or whatever, these different things, that they post it on their own social media for, hey, look at me?
Yes. So to the first question, yes, in the context of the logos, they're much more powerful if people read the article. So I do recommend linking to them. One thing is sometimes these articles disappear. It seems like every time a publication changes their CMS content management system, they throw out the old articles and start new rather than try to port them over to the new. So stuff disappears. That's why when people get articles, I always tell them, save them, take screenshots. There's great extensions in Chrome that you can take the whole page, beautiful screenshot, and it'll save it as an image or a PDF. I say save them as both. then take the actual link to the article while it's still alive, share it on your social media, share it in your email newsletters, share it in your email um, pipeline to leads. And the reason is when someone reads an article, it really it gives them a signal of trust, and a lot of people will convert from an article, especially if the price point's really low. If you're in B2B and it's a higher price point, they're not going to just click through and buy, but they're going to then do more research, and they are going to become a good lead that probably will yield some results down the line. But I've read so many articles about a really cool Kickstarter campaign. I'm like, oh, this person shared their story. They saw this need in the marketplace, and I've gone along with them on the journey, and now they're trying to get people to back them. And I click through, and if it's $50 or $70, I often will just support them, even if I don't need the darn product, because I just love the story. And that's what happens when we read earned media. And so, when you send these links on social media and to leads, when they read it, they start to say, hey, I was considering them. I was only about 40% of the way there, wasn't about to bite the bullet, but now that I've read this, I'm a little bit more likely to convert and become a customer. Same thing with your existing customers. Put that in front of them, because there's always churn. There are people who just feel like, hey, we've been with them for a few years, maybe we should try someone else. And if they see that article, they see that you've got this credibility and someone's written about you, they're more likely to say, I feel comfortable with who we have. We don't need to shop these guys this year. And so it really does radiate out there, and it is something that you could just share, with your audience, your leads, your customers, and it really does create lowering your churn, as well as bringing in some of your leads that probably weren't going to convert.
Excellent. Excellent, Mickie. Thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, and I learned a lot today. So you might let people know where they can find you.
Sure. So the website's ereleases.com, and I've talked a little bit about strategic types of releases. I have an hour masterclass. It's just an hour-long video.
That's
It's
the
a
eight
great place.
step one, yeah?
Yep. And
That's
it's a great,
fantastic. I watched that today. I
uh,
highly encourage everybody to go in and look at that. And you give a load of resources for that, the slides and everything. I learned, it's very well done.
Thank you. Thank you. That's at ereleases.com/plan, PLAN. And again, it's completely free. My goal is to get people to do better releases, because I know that they'll have more engagement and better success, and they'll stick to it longer and consider it more going forward. So, great place for you to begin. Like I said, it's completely free. And if you have any questions, feel free to go to our website, ereleases.com. You can chat, email, or call my office. There's no salespeople. There's no sales commissions. I only employ editors, and their job is just to give good customer service. And even if you want them to just take a look at a release that you've written or are considering, you can ask them. And if it's a whole release, allow 1 to 2 business days for them to get back to you. But we do that at no charge, and we'll provide some tips and advice, whether you end up using us or not.
Excellent. I'll make sure I put the links both on the audio and the video. Thank you very much, Mickie.
You're very welcome.
So that's all for the Speaking Podcast. You'll find all our episodes on speakingpodcast.com. Be sure to give us a thumbs up, 5-star rate, and share with your friends, and comment on everything that we discussed. Until next week, take care. So I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. As mentioned at the start, you'll find my 6 podcasts on bio.link/podcaster. And also, if you'd like to start a podcast or do a podcasting tour, you'll find the information on that or on the QR code that's there. Be sure to give us a thumbs up, 5-star rating, and share with your friends, because it really helps. And also, I'd like to thank DanielPackard.com, helping people with fear, doubt, and anxiety. He's got a 90% success rate, and he's only charging if he helps you. So be sure to check him out, and you get a free call to discuss everything. Until next week, take care.